Before we get started, just a quick note, spoiler alert.
And we are adults, and I will try very hard not to use adult language, but this is the warning.
Hello, my name is Jennifer, and welcome to Fright Bites.
I obviously didn't have my piece of paper with me. Okay. And my name is Serena. Each episode, we will feature a short story or novella. You can read along with us by finding the full reading list posted on our website, lastlibraryonTheLeft.com, or our social media at LLOTL Podcast. And today we have a special guest. You will find her on Instagram and other social media at bookish_Afro-Latina. Her name is Gabby. She is a librarian, an archivist, and historian. She reads books about minoritized folks, history, historical fiction, romance, and YA. And Gabby and I are actually friends. We met did we meet at MIT first or Simmons? I feel like
I think we met MIT first and then remembered that we went to the same program.
Yeah, because we were working in preservation and someone, I think maybe Charlene, was like, oh, blah, 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 Simmons. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, we met at work first.
We didn't even start talking until we went on that boat cruise.
Oh my God, that was so much fun.
Because we were trying to hide from other people. Classic.
Yes. Okay, can we just talk about how fancy that was, though, for your work to take you on a boat cruise? Is just like kind of a funsy day out.
It was overwhelming, to be honest.
I had such a great time.
Spending that company time.
Yes, that's what it is.
Wonderful. It's a whole new world.
Okay, so we are going to be talking about...
We're discussing Ring Shout by Djèlí Clarke. It was published in October 2020 by Tor.com Publishing.
I also want to point out that I actually read Mr. Clarke before putting him on the list. There was a short story published, not by Tor.com, it was on another article, and he had written The Secret Lives of the 9 Negro Teeth of George Washington. And y'all, it was so good.
I need to read that. I put it on my list.
It was brilliant.
I believe it, because this one was so good. I want to reread it again.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into this discussion.
So, from the publisher, Ring Shout is a dark fantasy historical novella that gives a supernatural twist to the Ku Klux Klan's reign of terror. D.W. Griffith is a sorcerer, and the birth of a nation is a spell that drew upon the darkest thoughts and wishes from the heart of America. Now rising in power and prominence, the Klan has a plot to unleash hell on earth. Luckily, Maurice Boudreaux has a magic sword and a head full of tails. When she's not running bootleg whiskey through Prohibition, Georgia, she's fighting monsters she calls Ku Kluxes. She's damn good at it too. But to confront this ongoing evil, she must journey between worlds to face nightmares made flesh and her own demons. Together with a foul-mouthed sharpshooter and a Harlem hellfighter, Maurice sets out to save a world from the hate that would consume it. And that doesn't even touch all of the greatness that is this book.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So before we even start book discussion, I just wanted to fangirl a little bit about Djèlí Clarke, who last night when I was looking at some of his book talks, I didn't realize he was born in New York, raised in Houston, and he's also of Trinidadian descent. So I felt very well represented, as I am also of Trinidadian descent. So
That's so funny.
I know him. He's family. So I was just fangirling very hard last night.
I love when that happens.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And I wanted to thank Sedita for introducing me to him, because now I have a new favorite author.
You're welcome.
You know what? You make me read a lot of things that I probably never would have read, but I am appreciative of it.
I love hearing that. I love it. So when I reviewed this book, I didn't know where to start. When it comes to horror, I don't really read scary books or anything. I have really bad anxieties and my dreams are extremely vivid. So I try to avoid things that'll be easily transplanted into my nightmares. And usually that's horror or thrillers, but I picked this book up because some of my friends on Instagram had recommended it, but also because it had the historical fiction element in there, and I love historical fiction. So I thought this will be good, and especially since it's short, and that description though. So it was a must. And first off, I just want to say the amount of gems and quotes in this book, I had to pause over and over to be like, hold on, that was gold right there. I put my little tabs, I was highlighting, I was going through this whole thing, and I kept thinking thinking, what are the quotes that I'd want to remember for posterity's sake or share with others that would give the essence of this book? So I picked a couple and I'll read them and say who said them. So I'll start with Maurice since we've already been introduced to her. So she has a line here that says, "What I have is beautiful music inspired by struggle and fierce love. What he got ain't nothing but hateful noise." And I love that quote.
Oh my gosh.
It had me
too.
goosebumps just reading that. But the other quote that really, whew, nothing but the truth, actually came from the dude I hate the most, Butcher Clyde, because of course he's going to say something. So Butcher Clyde says, "You see, the hate they give is senseless. They already got power, yet they hate those over they who got control, who don't really pose a threat to them. Their fears aren't real, just insecurities and inadequacies." And I was like, bam.
He's the truth and used it to his own advantage.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
the little demon is like, "I know what we're doing. Ha ha ha. Just thought I'd share this with you. But also, would you like to hate as well?"
Yes. And isn't that the epitome of hate too?
Yeah.
How can we make hate more hateful? Oh, you're right though. He said some stuff and I was like, but why you gotta be right?
He wasn't lying about any of it. And I think that this is just my take, mostly good historical fiction generally, is that it hits at things that we kind of brush over when it comes to regular history courses. In history courses, they tend to want to focus on dates or focus on these big moments like the Revolutionary War or things like that. But they don't talk as much about ideologies. There's not really a focus on how these movements start up, where that popularity is, why they keep going, and how a lot of these moments are intricately tied together. The situation with the KKK that not many people realize is that they're connected to the eugenics movement. They're connected to, because of eugenics, also connected to what happened in World War II and the Holocaust. Not as many people talk about this, but the Holocaust was actually inspired by the US. Hitler had been reading and sending his scientists, I guess you could say, and the other observers to the American South to see how the Americans were treating Black folks and using the same tactics and education programs, etc., to bring back to Germany. So they were using the same kind of ideas that the daughters of the Confederacy were using to rewrite history. So all of this is interconnected, but this is not something that you will hear in a regular history course. So when it comes to historical fiction, they usually draw upon that, especially this one. I mean, this one went into the roots for sure, which is why in my book review on Instagram, I was saying this would be an amazing book to include for a high school or college history course, or even sociology, etc. Pretty much any of the social science in this book. And I'd also include some science courses because there's actually the element of scientific racism.
So Dean and I, one thing that I had to confess early on, I was like, I'm not a big history person. I don't like history at all. But I think it's because going to school, because I'm an immigrant, but I went to school here in America. But history was always, like you said, dates and focusing on the big events and never really talking about the ideologies behind a lot of the things that happen. And I think if it was ideology focused, I may have liked history a lot more. I got the wrong education as far as history goes.
Surprise, surprise.
That's
surprise,
pretty much
surprise.
everyone.
Yeah,
I actually
so
hated history.
yeah, I couldn't stand history. And I had pretty decent teachers, but again, it was you focus on the dates, you focus on these specific events, you don't really talk about other things. And we recently talked about history and music, and I told Sedina that a lot of things that happened towards Black Americans and Mexican Americans, I was not privy to because as an immigrant herself, my mom and dad, I was either in school or with them or with a trusted family member. So I wasn't out in the world like most people were. And it was just eye-opening that music taught me something that my history teacher should have taught me. I think we're definitely failed as a society with history.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'd add that the thing that is so disappointing is as a society, we tend to focus on, like I said, the big events, but we don't actually mention that the majority of us would not have been one of these big names. A lot of people lose interest in history because they're thinking, okay, there's George Washington, there's Lincoln, blah, blah, blah. These people not only do not relate to you in any way, but also it seems like the driving force in in history courses and throughout history is portrayed as being these big people, these big figures, when in reality, the people who are driving history are not the ones that you read names of in the books. These are everyday people. So I try to remind people when you're thinking about history to place yourself within it. Where would you be if you were in this time? And that's kind of hard to do with just a history book, which is why I like historical fiction, because it forces you to put yourself into that element. Now you are experiencing these things with the other people.
On the ground level of history actually occurring.
Yes, exactly. Because that's the thing, is that people, they want to talk about time travel and experiencing things and such, but what they don't realize is that we are currently living in history. What we are living in right now will then be history tomorrow and in the future. And so it's not that people at that time were like, this is going to be a time to remember. Like, barely anybody thought like that. The only two people I've ever heard of being like, this will be history, is Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. They were the only ones who were like, this will be history, because they were talking about the 4th of July. So people don't realize that, like, most people in the 1920s weren't like, we're going to remember this as the Roaring 20s. No, I'm pretty sure no one was like, this is how it will be. Or your great grandmother wasn't like, my children will remember me dancing to smutty music in a bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
That's
just
the
had
truth.
a flash of social media and like every person in their 20s and what their grandchildren is going to be like. But now we see the evidence of you dancing to slutty music.
Yep, there it is. So if there's anything that will guide you in your choices, it'll be that other people will look back and be like, wow. So that's what they were like?
Yeah.
I know that that's not really a common way to think about daily life. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to be like, one day my grandchild will be, I don't know, pushing me down a path in my wheelchair and I'll be singing a Snoop Dogg tune and being like, what do you know about gin and juice? You know? And they'll be like, okay, grandma, you know?
Oh,
that was a tangent. Sorry.
That was a fun tangent.
It really was. I was thinking during the tangent too about Clarke's ability to put you in on that ground level of history. And a big part of what he did was the dialects. And I was thrown right back into my childhood in Memphis, Tennessee, growing up with the mountain people and the deep, deep South. And I was like, man, this is how Meemaw taught, like sitting on her porch and listening to everybody and just like the neighborhood. I was like, this is it. This is what I grew up with. I really enjoyed it, especially the rooftop scene, the very, very beginning, how they talked about the current events in their own lives. I was like, wow, this is just sitting on the porch with some sweet tea, listening to grown-ups.
Yeah. You know what part really cracked me up? So one of the aunties who can see the future and the past, this is what draws it closer to present day, is that she's quoting songs. She only talks in songs, and she keeps quoting songs from the present day or from like 2016 or something. And then the smirk that she gives whenever she says something nasty. Let me see you get low. But I just thought that was hilarious. And that was the thing that brought me back to it, is that she... of all the things that someone who can see all time frames would do, just quoting songs, and always perfect timing to it. Such an art school thing of her to do. Is to talk in lyrics. God love it.
Yeah, because I thought she was going to give us some really deep wisdom, and no.
That's the best part, though.
Yeah, she did.
I mean, she did sometimes. Yeah. I remember reading those parts and being like, that's me. I may be a history dork, but you know I'd be that person just quoting ridiculous songs at the very worst time.
Yeah, same.
And the fact that she's just chilling up in a tree half the time was weird. I feel like every Black horror that I've read/watched, was isn't a lot, has had some kind of comedic relief. And I think part of that is because of how dark our humor is, because of how ridiculous history has been to us. And so the easiest way to get through it is to also make jokes about dark things. And so, of course, we have this random part in here of all these silly songs or the conversations that they have where they're just talking shit. Yeah, I don't know where this inspiration came from for Mr. Clarke, but bravo.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I put it down to because the same thing is like he's got the Caribbean influence, and it's the same. What can you do but make fun of what's happening? I was telling Sedina, like, when I'm really focused in on deep, dark horror and psychological horror, I turn to Caribbean music because the songs are absolute nonsense. They really are. I was telling her there's
best.
like one series of songs where the first song is a man talking about losing his wife. The second song is her retaliation telling him like, well, I had to leave because you were cheating on me. And then like it goes on for like a series of songs to where you hear from the lawnmower man and the neighbor. And
Oh,
it's
that's good.
so it's just so like, but what else are you gonna? It's just that whole comic relief that just I just need to escape a little bit. So I get the dark humor and I get the jokes because yeah, that's life. Well, and I think that really
Yeah.
helped break up some of the horror and the darkness from the book
Mm.
too, right? It got really dark a couple times and it got really heavy a
Mhm.
couple times. So this helped break it up a little bit.
Yeah, one of the heavier times, at least one of the times like got really heavy for me was when we first met Emma and her and Chef argued about well, a lot of things. But Emma's Jewish. She uses German Yiddish in a lot of her dialect. One of the biggest things that stuck out to me about that she argued with was that she's promoting really idealistic versions of what she would like to see in the world. And as a socialist at heart myself, I like totally understood it. But the problem with her was that she couldn't get past the fact that she herself is passing and doesn't have to tell anybody that she's Jewish. Nobody would figure it out. She's just a German white person to them, an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was clouding her perception of the struggles of her comrades. It made me think about that kind of veil that passing people get, especially Jewish people, where we don't have to say anything. I wear my Star of David for reasons, and it made me think being Jewish is a death sentence, but being white is a stay of execution, and she just didn't see that.
Mhm.
Mm.
I had issue with all of them at different points in time. Maurice pissed me off sometimes. I was like, girl, what
God,
are you
yeah.
doing? What are you doing? Come
Yeah.
on. Don't be stupid. So sometimes Maurice was pissing me off. Of course, all of the characters had their moments.
Mhm.
Chef was like half and half for me, but that's typical for me with military folks, just because I understand that they're in a mindset, especially Chef was in a mindset of like, we're fighting for our country and our freedom
Yeah.
and blah, blah, blah. Like, we deserve this stuff too. But at the same time, Emma and Chef were both in the state of just thinking of things in the absolutes. Chef's thinking like, we need capitalism and maybe we should also be capitalists and then we would have better things. And then there's Emma's like, no, this is not right. But like Sedina was saying, Emma's missing some of the key things that make her plan not realistic
Yeah.
for the time frame. But the other characters have similar arguments too, you know, when they're talking about Garvey and talking about whether or not Black folks should just self-segregate / go home, or if we should stay here because we helped build this place. All of these arguments are still issues right now, and they've been arguments since, I don't know, before the Civil War. These are arguments that Frederick Douglass had with Lincoln, and a number of other big thinkers at the time were arguing the same issues. So it's been like, what, 200 years?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, yeah, we can't get past this.
Right. Yeah. Because we
Yep.
haven't figured it out.
Yeah, nobody knows yet.
No.
The whole going home thing isn't exactly as simple as they thought it was. I mean, they did
Yeah.
try with Liberia, but nowadays the going home story is with Ghana, as Ghana has started a campaign of recognizing their role in the slave trade and now trying to welcome home Black Americans if they want to come there. But part of that is for business reasons,
right,
to help with promoting entrepreneurship specifically seems to be the goal.
You were saying that Emma and Chef and everyone else kind of thought in absolutes, but we're still thinking in absolutes just
we
like
are.
we were in 200 years ago, and it's so unhelpful. I get the allure to thinking in absolutes because then you don't have to pick apart all the actual problems
right,
and look at the actual, what the real solutions will look like. I really hyper focused in on Emma and Chef's argument because I was like, bro, I get it. I too was young and absolutist at one point before I got out of my head and realized that there were other human beings around me.
Yeah. And it's so easy to think in absolutes as well. A lot of times, especially for myself personally, that was the easier route to do. And the knowledge that comes with breaking that apart and tearing it down and really diving deep into yourself is a lot harder. Yeah, I get it.
We really learned that through Maurice throughout the book, because when it comes to books that have heroes and such, especially when it comes to ones that have to do with fighting the enemy. It tends to be like, this one is the good one and this one is the bad one. But this book is showing that she is not necessarily the hero that we usually see in these books or in these films. She has these issues too. She struggles with hate within herself. And throughout the book, each of the people that we're following actually have some redeeming qualities and some qualities where we're like, yeah, that's going to get you killed. Also, maybe not the best idea. Things like that. They're not exactly all wise and everything. Even the aunties are questionable from time to time.
Yeah.
They are not without guilt. And I think that's the thing. People are always like, oh, why would they think this is a good idea? Why would this person choose to align with one enemy for this, but then fight against that same enemy later? Yeah, there's reason for that. And it's just that sometimes your ideas align in one way and sometimes they don't. Or maybe the problem pops up later. You know, there's all these kinds of things. And that's the psychology behind the whole thing. The sociology connected to this is that you can't just guess what they're going to do next.
Right.
Which is really surprising for a horror. Usually you can be like, okay, everyone's going to be like, let's split up.
Yeah.
We know where this is going. That didn't happen this time. This was not a predictable storyline here.
Yeah.
In no way would I have predicted that whole tree thing.
The tree thing. That was crazy.
That was out of left field. And I think that's what kept me going.
When Maurice was talking to Butcher Clyde and then all of a sudden he turned into a bunch of mouths, that was gross. I was like, but I had to keep reading, and then we got to the tree and I'm like, no, and it was just so disturbing.
Cracks me up though is that part of the reason why I was so fascinated reading those parts was because it actually reminded me of some anime. And I'm not really like a huge anime person, but these are things visually that I have seen in some anime. So I've seen it in Full Metal Alchemist. There's an actual character with 1,000,000 mouths and faces and stuff.
Brought that up. The whole time I was reading about the mouths thing, I was like, oh my god, this is so like FMA. And it was the first time I started to wonder, did FMA have some inspiration from Lovecraftian horror? Like,
I don't know. Possibly.
Yeah, I would say possibly.
I could see that because I just kept thinking, like, I'm picturing that. And then there's also this other anime that I watched where, it's called Parasite, of course. And they have a character in the beginning who I think his arm is taken over by a parasite who, like, he talks to from time to time. So this kind of reminded me of that when I was reading this book. And I just kept picturing all of the Klansmen are the regular dudes, right?
Yeah.
So I was picturing them being subsumed into Butcher Clyde or into this new being. It just kept reminding me of that anime. So part of me was trying to be like, this is serious. And the other part of me was like, ew. Gross.
I was like, oh, there's the horror. There's the horror. Because it was in my head, the mouths, and I can't unsee it. And I can't unsee the cover with the mouths and the eyes. And I was freaking out because, like, I have that trypophobia thing. And I was
You read it physically, right? I was listening and reading physically. I was switching on and off. The audiobook narrator does the singing parts too. So it's pretty amazing. So when I realized that there was going to be singing, I would switch to the audiobook, especially because I wanted to see what the songs sounded like. But the part that's creepy as hell is when the audiobook narrator goes to do Butcher Clyde's multiple voices when all the mouths are singing. This person like can't actually do all the different mouths, but you can hear what it would sound like if you had multiplied that voice, just the singing off pitch. So it really drives home that whole quote that Maurice has, what he got ain't nothing but hateful noise. It's kind of hard to hear the hateful noise without actually listening to the off-key singing and stuff like that for those voices.
Since we're talking about the clans versus the Ku Klux, Butcher Clyde and all that stuff, the one thing that really bothered me was this idea that the hate festers and invites the contagion to hollow people out, and the monsters grow from that. I felt like that was kind of excusing the inherent hate that was already there in the white conservative Christian evangelists. Like, the people right now are calling Texans Talibangelists, which kind of gives an excuse other than that they were always conservative monsters looking to control women, whatever, people not like them. And I was like, that bothers me. The monster that is Butcher Clyde didn't need a welcome mat if they already had monsters in them.
Right. If anything, he gave them an excuse to be their true selves because they were
Right.
always that
Exactly.
anyways, which is what we're seeing now in Texas.
I think that is the main point. It did bother me, but at the same time, I thought about what happens when hatred has no power. When you individually hate a person or hate certain kinds of people, what does that really do? Not much. You just hated them. That is it. But once hatred comes in a whole group of people all together hating the same people and the same things, that picks up steam. Then you put somebody in there who has a leadership role or some kind of connection to the government, etc. That's when it gets the power from it. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize when they do the whole reverse racism shit, is that they'd be like, oh, but I went to a Black neighborhood and they were all mean to me. And I'm like, okay, but did you lose a job because of it? Are you not allowed to buy a house because of that? What exactly is this stopping you doing except from like enjoying yourself in that town? There's a difference between people hating you and people outright coming to get you because of the hate. They don't have the power of that. So this is sounding closer to me of like the difference between these groups of people who had lynching parties. So there's the lynching party people versus the people who infiltrated not infiltrated, the government was basically KKK. The people who were in the government who then were like, you know, we're not just going to stop at killing one man at a lynching party. We're going to make it so that every Black man who is not a sharecropper somehow will end up in prison. We're going to make it so that every Black person will be too scared to try and sit at a lunch counter. It's one step up. And I feel like that's what he's trying to drive home is that, yeah, they already hated things before, but now they're all united and doing the same thing together.
Right.
That's makes point. It was already terrifying before. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
This is to the point of, who is it, Sadie was saying about the government being connected to this and people not believing her that the government was connected to this. Yes, a lot of people don't realize this, but our government didn't actually want to help the Jews during World War II. Oh, yeah. That was not a thing. They turned them away twice. There was a ship waiting to come in with Jewish refugees, and our president was like, nah. And also, people don't know this about JFK's family. His dad and his brother were anti-Semites. His brother was actually like, let's give Hitler a chance, you know, so let's not. That's a real thing. He literally wrote that to his father. His dad was also like, you know, these Jews are like really pissing me off. His dad sucked hardcore. And his dad was like, I don't think we should get involved. He actually told the president at the time, because he was involved in that administration, that he thought it was a bad idea for us to get involved in protecting the Jews and in World War II generally. So if it were up to him, we would not have even gone there. Yeah, they were already there. They were in the government. They've been in the government since the founding. They're still there. They didn't just like disappear. You know,
they're embedded in there.
Yeah, it's embedded in every single layer. And I think that's exactly why people were afraid to listen to Sadie. Is because if this were an issue where it's just in their town, or like an issue where it's just surrounding the movie or something, then they could be like, okay, we could fight that. But Sadie's saying, oh no, it's not just in the movie, it's literally a part of the government. And everyone's like, Sadie, hilarious. What would make you think such a thing, you silly girl? And of course they don't take her seriously because she reads tabloids. And that's another thing. That's sexism right there. The assumption that women who are reading something that's considered popular stuff would be someone to disregard. Time and again. It never fails. It's literally every time.
I know. God.
Like, who cares about BTS? But now everyone cares about BTS. That's what that reminds me of. Every singing group or something, they're like, anything that teenage girls like is obviously stupid. And it seems that everyone did that to Sadie, where they're like, Sadie, why are you reading tabloids? US Weekly is incorrect.
And reading from Maurice's point of view, primarily the whole entire book, she also has that thought of Sadie. And so you are being kind of led down this path of the narrator's gaslighting you into believing that Sadie is too flighty, too flaky, too in her head to be trusted. But one of the first notes I wrote down was like, Sadie gets it.
This is why Maurice pissed me off so much. Was that she kept on thinking that she knew everything. And I hate that. I cannot stand when people be like, oh, let me get some advice. And then someone gives them some advice and they'd be like, nah, I know better and you are wrong.
and stupid even. And she's over here like, oh, these wise women just told me to stay away from this guy. I'm going to walk into his den now and provoke him.
Yeah.
Even more. Because I feel like this is good for me. This is good for us, really. Like, she didn't even go by herself. She led other people into danger because she did not want to listen to advice. I can't, that was giving me some masculinity vibes. It was.
Yeah, Maurice
It's such a manly thing to do.
It is. And then she went back. Yeah, she had a lot of audacity. She really pissed me off too. Because then she went back to them.
She went back to them like, so what had happened was, and I'm like, girl, first off, acting like they don't know.
Right.
That's number one. Like they are all knowing. So how the hell? But the fact that she goes back like, so I made a mistake.
Help me.
What do we do now? Help. Yeah, help me. What do we do now? Yeah, disturbing.
Do something
But speaking
else.
of disturbing, the doctors though.
So
the doctors
were fascinating to me because
of course they were.
That particular mythos comes up in multiple places. So they attacked the Ku Klux with silver and iron, which is traditionally to hunt fae and wolf and things like that. And the aunties were fox-like, which is of course like the ambiguity of the trickster gods across the world.
I don't know much of that lore. I was thinking specifically of the doctors in the South who had experimented on enslaved people to create all of these different viewpoints, or for example the ones who breeded enslaved people because they truly believed that mixed people would be like mules and would not be able to procreate and would go insane at some point in their lives. So that's what I was picturing when the doctors showed up, and I understood the fear as soon as they showed up, the fear of them experimenting. But what I wasn't expecting was for them to be feeding off of misery rather than feeding off of the supposed knowledge that they would be gaining from these experiments.
I think that that's their thing. Like they pull apart, they torture, they go after the thing that makes you crawl into yourself. Like that's their whole shtick. Because the little girl version of herself is like they go after what makes us hurt.
Yeah.
They're not in it for knowledge. They're not in it for anything. They're in it to not even to fester pain because they steal it from you. They take it completely. They carve it out. They hollow you. And so I thought that was really interesting.
That is fascinating. And it sounds about right.
Yeah.
But it seems like all of these dark figures are drawing off of somebody else's emotion or experience. So like you have the doctors, they're drawing off of that agony, the pain. And then of course, Butcher Clyde is talking about the Ku Klux is drawing off of hate. So then by the end of this book, yes, I was satisfied with the ending, but they did hint at, more fighting, more to come in Rhode Island and more threats rising, because obviously this isn't going to be like the end where we're like, yay, Butcher Clyde is gone. That wasn't the original thing in the first place. So I just thought, I wish that this was like a series, but I also know that it's one of those things where it's perfectly done, and as soon as you try to replicate that, you could ruin it.
Yeah.
I can't critique it for that. He had a good point with leaving it the way that he did. It's just that I could see this going as a similar TV show to Lovecraft.
Yeah, I could definitely see this in moving forward into a series, like you said, but I am perfectly happy with the one-off because it is very relevant to, yes, you defeated this one Butcher Clyde, but that's not the end of it, much like true life. Yeah, we've eliminated so-and-so, but there's still so much more work to be done. Living in the now history, like you said.
Butcher Clyde isn't even like really the big bad. He's the tool with which the big bad uses to try to get in. So there's always going to be tools.
Right.
Oh,
People that will happily be tools.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. We've seen so many of them in recent times.
Oh my gosh, yes, they're everywhere.
So many tools.
So I had a couple things that I wanted to bring up. I really loved the Gullah speak. When I looked at it, I was like, he says Gullah, and I was like, no, that's Patois. And then I was like, no, Jennifer, you gotta look it up. It is a Creole language, but it's so similar to Patois and the Guyanese Creole and the Trinidadian Creole that my mom and my dad speak. So it was so easy for me to understand, and I just felt so as if that was my grandma talking to me, Nana Jean. It was nice to get that hint of, because I know a lot of Creole people will understand it. I know a lot of Caribbean folks will understand it. It's very relatable to those of us that are not very well represented, especially in America. Like my Caribbean side is not really that well represented, especially here in Texas. So to get that representation was really nice. Again, I just thank Sedina because this was such a good book. And I really enjoyed that they stuck true to it. When I was looking up the Gullah language and and some of the phrases that they use and how different they were to like Trinidadian and Guyanese Creole. Some of the words were spot on and the phrases were spot on. So I don't know if Djèlí Clarke, I don't know how much patois he speaks. I always reference it to patois because that's what I was growing up knowing it's called. I was wondering how much of it at home he spoke because I don't speak a lot of it. I can understand a lot of it, but my mom speaks it because that's what she was raised up speaking when she was in Guyana. So it was really interesting. And I love that he didn't shy away from it. And now I wish that I would have listened to the ebook to hear the different pronunciations.
Oh yeah. The audio adds to the whole thing, especially when each of these quotes come up before each of the sections, these chapters. Yeah, I really love that part of it. Yeah, I agree. It's nice to hear that element of it. I mean, I've seen Gullah featured in a few other books, but it's usually not as intertwined with the story like this. It's usually like one character, whereas this one has quotes from folks throughout the book.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And of course, they're all connected each time. Another thing that's great about it is that it kind of intellectualizes this because a lot of times when people think about people who speak like pidgin languages, they have historically seen that as something that people who aren't smart do.
Yeah, it's uneducated,
they see
right?
that, yes, lack of education. However, each of these quotes from the people who are speaking this language are really wise, really poignant. I just think about
too.
Yeah. And I just think about how many times their observations and words probably went unnoticed and just ignored because everyone thought, oh, these are just some stupid idiots who can't speak English correctly. The amount of times that I've seen my own family members be disregarded for similar reasons. Just because you don't sound smart in English doesn't mean you don't sound smart in your own language. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. It's just such an American thing to do.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, you're a dummy. You don't even speak English. Are you kidding me right now?
But for me, I think it's so embarrassing. I just think like this shows you the strength and the adaptability and the flexibility of people that can speak any type of language like Gullah. My own experience from Trinidadian and Guyanese Creole is that it is influenced by Indian culture, it's influenced by Creole and Cajun culture, it's influenced by African culture, and it's also got influences from South America. All of these elements came in to bring this one language together. And to say that it's dumb, actually, it's kind of a little bit more modern because they're showing that they can adapt a little bit better than you can. And they can adapt to several different cultures where you can barely even adapt to your own. So,
snaps.
Yeah, who's dumb now?
Yeah, who's dumb now?
And if you think about why those languages needed to develop anyway, it was because of ocean trade. It was because of the spread of culture, the age of exploration.
Yeah.
So that was a very modern and high intellectual, like it's like our discussion in the backwoods horror where people who went and pioneered were revered, but now they're seen as country folk and hillbilly and things like that.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened with the languages. People went out there into the world and did what they needed to do, I guess, to expand their empires. And now we have all of the pidgin languages. They're amazing. They're truly proof of the triumph of intellectualism to me, you know?
So what I wanted to bring up is the whole KKK parade thing. I'm pretty sure that people who don't know much about the KKK will probably be like, what? This would never happen. And I'm here to tell you, yes, it did many times. And still a thing, unfortunately. I don't think that people realize that the KKK was a family organization and still is. It started up, yes, as like this whole vigilante thing in the mid 1800s and such, but once it reemerged in the early 1900s going into 1920s, they had turned it into a social club where the wives and the children would also be a part of this. Yes, their wives had the same pointed hoods and everything. This wasn't like a one-off where they only did violence and then disappeared. No, they would have parades, they would have picnics, they would have all kinds of special events. And no, the wives were not just innocent bystanders.
No.
That's another issue in itself. Everyone tends to think that these wives were just showing up because their husbands were there. But no, they were a huge part of these organizations. They had their own, actually, women of the KKK. and they were sharing propaganda against Catholics, against Jews, against Black, but mostly everyone except for Protestant whites. And Italians weren't really considered that. At that moment, they weren't fully white yet. They were not in the category yet, especially Sicilians were at the time considered not white. The amount of cases I've read are, I'm just going to say right now, you would be shocked. This one woman was trying to marry a Black man, and of course that was against the law at the time, but they were like, wait a minute, she's Sicilian. She ain't white. She can marry him. And then it worked. So this is like a whole part. Yeah, it really cracks me up. But I mean, it's obviously really disturbing to know that these women were so involved in distributing this information and teaching their children that and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were not ashamed whatsoever. In fact, so the book that I brought with me to highlight, if people want a historical background, at least part of the historical background from this book, they might want to read Women of the Klan. This says Racism and Gender in the 1920s. This is by Kathleen M. Blee, and it has actual interviews with the women who were part of the Klan. There are images from their little picnics and stuff. They had little advertisements in the newspaper in most of these places. In fact, a lot of the women in this one, they're from the Indiana Klan, which I don't think people realize that Indiana is a part of this. But it was actually like the hate capital for a minute there.
That's crazy.
People don't know that. Yeah. So when everyone was like, what? Mike Pence is a descendant of these people.
Shock.
His town was a huge place for the KKK, which is why when I saw him, I was like, it's the devil incarnate. So yeah, I highly recommend that folks at least like read a few parts from here, because these women genuinely thought that they were doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
They truly believed everything they were doing. Some of them, yes, feel bad about it, but yeah, it's really mind-boggling. And also there was a woman who was involved in spreading the chapters of the KKK.
Wow.
They are not the innocents, I will say.
No.
And this whole thing about the children will make things different. I just want you to keep in mind,
the Hitler youth.
That the people we have in our government right now, these old dudes, are the children of these women. Just want you to know.
Yeah.
Also, like, the children, that indoctrination is part of our shtick in America. So, like, come on.
Yeah. Like, Mitch McConnell is the child of these people. He grew up with all of this. And once he got that, you know, that indoctrination in early, it's kind of hard to uproot at any point in their lives unless they specifically are putting in that work. And we know he's not.
No,
so
not
most of them are not, honestly. And that benefits them.
Yeah. I'll just make two quick notes, because in this book you think it's just the Ku Klux Klan, but it's actually the Klan and then the Ku Kluxes. And the difference is that the Ku Kluxes are supernatural monsters embedded into the Klan, but they also have the ability to evolve, which they're evolving into more dangerous beings. And I thought that was funny.
That kind of freaked me out.
Well, I thought it was funny that the Ku Kluxes could evolve, although be it dangerous beings, but that the Klan members could never evolve. And I was like, what does that mean?
Accurate.
That didn't even occur to me. I got really hyper focused on Molly's, by the way, Choctaw, that was awesome. But the Molly's dissection of them and talking about them evolving, and I was like, whoa.
No, when she said evolve, I just cracked up. I was like, wait a minute, you're telling me the supernatural ones can evolve, but the regular ones cannot? Is that because they're so
it's
dumb?
Accurate though.
Right.
No, it's accurate. Here's the thing. People are like, oh, I don't think that they hate us on purpose. They're always saying, oh, they're just ignorant, right? And yes, there are chunks of people who are simply just ignorant. However, there's also the chunks of people who do all of this on purpose. And I feel like those are the ones who are evolving. You know, our special Thomas Jeffersons and George Washingtons who have evolved to even worse people. And I'm like, how does it happen? Richard Spencer, damn, but that's what happened.
Like Clarke
they
gave
just
it
keep
to
coming
us.
back. Yes, he did. And I feel like that's a joke to mostly us.
Yeah, it is.
Only because we're like, of course.
Of course. Like, and it was so subtly put in there too.
Yeah, he didn't even outright say it.
No.
You're right.
He had to be quick to pick it up.
Yeah, these dummies can't do a thing. No. No, you know what though? It speaks to like what that woman was doing at the end, the one that Maurice saw in the shop.
Oh, the mom.
Eating with her son, the mom. And then at the end, she's like, they were monsters all along.
Yeah, she's so shocked.
And Maurice was
that it
like,
could have
well,
occurred.
yeah, glad you're finally seeing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It only took you almost dying
Yeah.
to
right.
figure that one out.
It was so funny to me. And I was like, I had to write it down. And then just one more word about the aunties. That's like a really significant word in the Indo-Caribbean culture. It's one, it's a sign of respect to non-blood. I say relatives because I always think of them as relatives, but non-blood older folks. But like, just like the aunties in the book, they're full of unsolicited advice.
Truth.
They always know what's going on, but they are still full of wisdom and they do care about you. But the unsolicited advice, I was like, I have many an aunt who's done that to me.
Can we
And
also
then
talk
they-
about how they're always trying to feed you, even though you're not actually eat? Like, can we talk about how they were
so
always trying to feed
real.
her?
So real.
Yeah.
And how they'd be like, oh, you can tell us what happened, although we already know.
Yeah.
Like, we already know. Just go ahead and explain it. That's fine.
Yeah. I have many of those in my family. And it's just so funny because I was like, oh gosh, I just relate to this so much.
I love them.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
all I have. I don't really have much. I loved it. I loved hearing your analysis. I love Sedina's analysis on Emma because I was specifically going to ask you about Emma.
Yeah, I got hyper focused on Emma. 'Cause
Sweet,
I was
sweet
like,
Emma.
ugh, I see you, but also you got it so wrong. So wrong.
Well, yeah, the only thing I'll add is that if anybody else is going to be reading The Conductors by Nicole Glover, which has some similar elements to this book, I'm planning to read it in October with a series of other kind of creepy, magical things. So if you want to join me, please do, and follow me on Instagram. We can talk about all this stuff if that's what you like.
Sounds good to me.
Yes, I agree.
All right.
Cool,
Well,
so
thank
I'll
you
send
so
that
much,
to you.
Gabby. And with that, I guess we are going to go ahead and let you go, Gabby. And thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
right.
Bye.
Nice meeting you, Jennifer. Bye, y'all.
If you liked listening to us ramble on about horror, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at LLOTL Podcast.
Check out our website by going to lastlibraryontheleft.com. Be sure to visit our About Us page to discover our 2 truths and a lie. Or, if you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at somethingwicked@lastlibraryontheleft.com.